Kale Moonwhisper walked quietly through the dark forest. His pointed ears moved slightly as he listened for any strange sounds. The tall elf had been guarding the borders of Eldheim for many years. His people lived deep in these ancient woods and never talked to outsiders. They believed all aliens were dangerous and wanted to destroy their peaceful world. The night was calm until a bright light flashed across the sky. Kyle looked up and saw something burning as it fell toward the crystal lakes. The object was huge and made a terrible noise as it crashed into the water. Steam rose from the lake as the strange metal thing sank below the surface. Kale knew he should report this to the Elven Council right away. His people had strict rules about staying away from anything that came from the stars. But something inside him said he needed to look closer. He had always been curious about the world beyond the forest. He ran toward the lake and saw pieces of the crashed ship floating in the water. The metal was silver and covered with strange symbols that glowed with blue light. Kale had never seen anything like it before. He used his elven magic to walk on the water surface and moved closer to the wreckage. Inside the broken ship, he found three beings unlike anything in elven stories. They had blue skin that seemed to shine in the moonlight. Their hair was silver like starlight, and they had strange markings on their faces that flickered weakly. Two of them were not moving and seemed to be dead, but the third one was still breathing. This survivor was a female who looked young. Her clothes were torn, and she was bleeding from a wound on her side. The glowing markings on her skin were very dim and getting dimmer. Kyle could tell she was dying. He knew he should leave her and report to his elders. But looking at her face, he saw something that reminded him of his own sister who had died in an accident years ago. This alien was someone's daughter, too. Someone somewhere was probably worried about her. Kyle carefully lifted the injured alien from the wreckage. She was lighter than he expected, but still unconscious. He carried her to a hidden cave he knew about near the lake. This place was where he sometimes went to think when his duties became too heavy. Inside the cave, Kyle used his healing magic to help the alien woman. Elven magic was different from anything else in the galaxy. It came from nature and could heal almost any wound if used correctly. Green light flowed from his hands into her body. The bleeding stopped, and her breathing became stronger. As the alien woman slowly woke up, she looked at Kale with eyes that were purple, like deep space. She seemed scared at first, but then realized he had saved her life. She tried to speak, but her voice was very weak. "Thank you," she whispered in a language that somehow Kale could understand. "I am Lyra Starweaver. My people will be looking for me." Kale learned that Lyra was not just any alien. She was a princess from a place called the Zephyrian Empire. Her mother was Queen Zara Voidheart, who ruled over many worlds across the stars. Lyra explained that her ship had been attacked by enemies called the Draconian Consortium. "They want to capture me alive," Lyra said as she got stronger. "I have special abilities that let me read minds and see into people's thoughts. The Draconians want to use these powers to steal secrets from my mother's empire." Kale was surprised to learn that the Zephyrian Empire was not evil like his people believed. Lyra told him stories of how her mother's forces protected weak planets from invaders. They helped species that could not defend themselves and brought peace to systems that had been at war for hundreds of years. "Your people think we are conquerors," Lyra said sadly, "but we are protectors. We only fight when others start the violence first." As days passed, Kale brought food and water to Lyra while she recovered. He learned about worlds beyond his imagination, cities that floated in the clouds, of gas giants, space stations where 100 different species lived together in peace, technologies that could heal any disease or feed entire planets. Lyra also learned about elven culture from Kyle. She was amazed by how his people lived in harmony with nature. Their magic was something her advanced science could not explain. She told him that her mother would be very interested in meeting beings who could do such wonderful things. But Kale knew his people would never accept such contact. The Elven Council had made laws long ago that anyone who helped outsiders would be sent away forever. Elder Maya Silverleaf and the other leaders believed that isolation was the only way to keep their world safe. During their time together, Kale noticed that Lyra's special powers were not working correctly. Sometimes she would suddenly look scared and hold her head in pain. She explained that her telepathic abilities had been damaged in the crash. Instead of reading thoughts on purpose, She was now seeing random memories and emotions from everyone around her. "I keep seeing flashes of things that happen to other people," she said. "It hurts, and I cannot control it." Kale realized that Lyra was in more danger than just from her enemies. Her own powers were becoming a problem that could kill her if not fixed soon. He knew that somewhere out there, the Draconians were still looking for her. And soon, his own people would discover what he had done. But looking at Lyra as she smiled while watching fireflies dance in the cave entrance, Kale made a decision that would change everything. He would protect her no matter what the cost to himself. 3 dark ships appeared in the sky above Eldheim like storm clouds that brought only death. Kyle watched from his hidden cave as the Draconian vessels moved slowly over the forest. They were scanning for something, and he knew exactly what they wanted to find. Commander Vex Shadowbane stood on the bridge of the lead ship studying the readings on his screens. The Draconian was tall and covered in black scales that reflected no light. His red eyes glowed as he spoke to his crew in a voice like grinding metal. "The princess is down there somewhere," Vex said. "Her biosignature is weak but still detectable. Begin ground operations immediately. I want her alive and unharmed." Draconian soldiers dropped from their ships using flying armor that made no sound. They carried weapons that could stun rather than kill. Each soldier had scanners built into their helmets that could track Zephyrian life signs. They spread out through the forest like a plague looking for their target. But the Draconians were not the only ones hunting. Elder Maya Silverleaf had called an emergency meeting of the Elven Council. The old elf woman had silver hair that reached the ground and eyes that had seen too many years of keeping secrets. "Someone among us has broken our most sacred law," Maya announced to the gathered elders. "The Watchers report that Kale Moonwhisper has not returned from his patrol. At the same time, alien ships circle our world. This cannot be coincidence. Captain..." Lisa Thornwick stepped forward from the group of elven rangers. She had been Kale's friend since childhood, and the two had trained together for many years. But now her face showed only disappointment and anger. "Give me permission to find him," Lisa said. "If Kale has truly helped outsiders, then he must face judgment for his crimes against our people." Maya nodded slowly. "Take your best rangers and bring him back. If he resists, then treat him as you would any other enemy of Eldheim." Deep in his cave, Kale could feel the danger closing in from all sides. Lyra's condition was getting worse as her broken telepathic powers caused her terrible pain. She would suddenly cry out and hold her head as images flooded her mind without warning. "I can see them," Lyra whispered with fear in her voice. "The Draconians are remembering what they did to my people. They capture Zephyrians and do horrible experiments. They want to learn how our minds work so they can control us." Kyle saw flashes of the memories that Lyra could not block out. Draconian scientists cutting into alien brains while their victims were still alive. Prisoners forced to use their telepathic powers until their minds broke completely. Children taken from their families to be turned into weapons. "We have to get you away from here," Kale said as he gathered supplies for travel. "Both the Draconians and my own people will be here soon." But moving Lyra would not be easy. She was still weak from her injuries, and her telepathic episodes were happening more often. Each time she lost control of her powers, she became more exhausted. Kyle knew they needed to find help soon, or she would not survive. They left the cave, just as dawn was breaking over the forest. Kyle used paths that only the oldest elves remembered. These trails wound through parts of the woods where the trees grew so thick that sunlight never reached the ground. He hoped the darkness would hide them from the scanners. For hours they moved through the ancient forest, while behind them the sounds of searching grew louder. Draconian soldiers were cutting through trees with energy weapons. Elven rangers were following tracks that even Kale could not hide completely. "Why are you doing this?" Lyra asked as they rested beside a stream. "Your people will never forgive you for helping me. You could have left me to die and no one would have blamed you." Kyle looked at the alien princess and tried to find words for feelings he did not completely understand himself. "My sister died when I was young," he said finally. "I could not save her, but maybe I can save you. Sometimes that is all we can do to make sense of our pain." Lyra reached out and touched his hand. Even though her telepathic powers were broken, she could still sense the goodness in his heart. "My mother taught me that courage is not about being fearless. It is about being afraid, but doing what is right anyway." Their moment of peace ended when energy blasts began cutting through the trees around them. A squad of draconian soldiers had found their trail and was closing in fast. The alien warriors moved through the forest like hunting beasts following the scent of blood. Kale grabbed Lyra's hand and they ran deeper into the woods. Behind them, they could hear the heavy footsteps of armored soldiers and the whine of charging weapons. The draconians were not trying to be quiet anymore. They knew their prey was close. "This way," Kale said as he led Lyra toward an area where the oldest trees grew. These ancient giants had stood for thousands of years, and their roots ran deep into the earth. Among them were ruins left by elves who had lived long before the current civilization. But as they reached the edge of the ruins, Lisa Thornwick stepped out from behind a massive tree trunk. The elven captain had her bow drawn and an arrow pointed directly at Kale's heart. Behind her came 6 more rangers, all with weapons ready. "Stop right there, traitor," Lisa said with sadness in her voice. "You have dishonored everything we stand for. Release the alien and come with us willingly, or we will take you by force." Kale stepped in front of Lyra to protect her from the elven arrows. He drew his own sword but knew he could not fight all 7 rangers and win. These were his former friends and fellow protectors of the forest. The thought of hurting them made his heart ache. "She is not our enemy, Lisa," Kale said desperately. "Everything we were taught about the Star People is wrong. They are not invaders. They are protectors just like us." "You have been poisoned by alien lies," Lisa replied. "Step aside, Kale. Do not make this harder than it has to be." At that moment, energy blasts erupted from the forest as draconian soldiers surrounded the clearing. The black-armored warriors had followed the sound of voices and now had both groups trapped. Commander Vex Shadowbane emerged from the shadows with his weapon pointed at Lyra. "How convenient," Vex said with a voice like grinding stone. "I can collect the princess and eliminate witnesses at the same time." The elven rangers turned their weapons toward this new threat, but they had never faced technology like the draconians carried. Energy shields protected the alien soldiers while their weapons could cut through elven armor like paper. Kyle knew that in seconds everyone in the clearing would be dead, except for Lyra, who would be taken to face a fate worse than death. He looked at the ancient ruins around them and remembered stories his grandfather had told about the old magic that still slept in these stones. With no other choice left, Kale pressed his hands against the nearest ruin and called upon power that had not been used for centuries. The ancient stones began to glow with blue light as Kale channeled his magic into the forgotten ruins. Power that had slept for thousands of years awakened at his touch. The elven rangers stepped back in fear as symbols appeared on the old walls, like fire writing itself across stone. Commander Vex raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a portal of swirling energy opened in the center of the clearing. The gateway showed glimpses of star-filled space on the other side. Ancient elven magic had torn a hole between worlds. "Impossible," Vex snarled as his scanners went wild trying to understand what they were seeing. "No primitive species should have such technology." Kale grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the portal. He could feel the unstable magic fighting against itself. This gateway had not been used since the first elves learned to walk between stars. There was no way to know if it would kill them or transport them safely. "The portal is breaking apart," Lyra shouted over the howling wind that poured from the gateway. "If we go through, we might not survive." Kyle looked back at Lisa and the other rangers who were firing arrows at the draconian soldiers. Energy weapons answered with deadly precision. His people were brave, but they could not win against such advanced technology. If he stayed, everyone would die. "Sometimes we have to choose between certain death and possible death," Kale said as he stepped into the portal with Lyra still holding his hand. The journey through space felt like being torn apart and put back together again. Stars rushed past them in streams of light that burned the eyes. Lyra screamed as her damaged telepathic powers reacted to the magical energies around them. Kyle held her close and hoped they would both survive long enough to reach the other side. They crashed onto a metal floor in a place that smelled of engine oil and recycled air. Kale opened his eyes and saw they were inside some kind of spacecraft. But this ship was different from the sleek Zephyrian vessel that had crashed on his world. This one looked like it had been built from spare parts and held together with determination. "Well, this is interesting," said a voice with a strange accent. I was expecting a cargo shipment, not two refugees falling out of thin air. Kale looked up to see a human woman pointing a weapon at them. She had short brown hair and scars on her face that spoke of many battles. Her clothes were practical rather than fancy, and her eyes were the color of steel. Behind her stood two more humans who also carried guns. "I am Captain Rose Hamilton of the merchant vessel Spirit of Aurora," the woman said. "You have exactly 30 seconds to explain how you got onto my ship before I space you both." Lyra struggled to sit up despite her weakness. "Please, Captain. We need help. I am Princess Lyra Starweaver of the Zephyrian Empire. Draconian forces are hunting me, and this elf risked everything to save my life." Rose lowered her weapon slightly but did not put it away. "Zephyrian royalty traveling with an elf through some kind of magic portal. Either you are telling the truth or you are both completely insane." "The truth," Kyle said as he helped Lyra stand. "We used an ancient gateway to escape. The Draconians want to capture her alive because of her telepathic abilities." "Draconians," Rose repeated with anger in her voice. "Those scaled bastards have been hitting human colonies on the frontier for months, taking people as slaves and burning everything else." She holstered her weapon and gestured for them to follow her. "Come on, then. If you are enemies of the Draconians, then you might be useful to me." Rose led them through corridors that were cramped but clean. The ship was obviously old but well-maintained. In the medical bay, she had Lyra lie down while scanning her injuries with equipment that looked primitive compared to Zephyrian technology. "You are in bad shape, Princess," Rose said as she read the results. "Internal bleeding has stopped, but your brain is showing unusual activity patterns. What exactly are these telepathic powers you mentioned?" Lyra explained about her abilities and how they had been damaged in the crash. As if to prove her point, she suddenly cried out and grabbed her head as another wave of uncontrolled memories hit her. This time, Kale saw flashes of what she was experiencing, images of human families being dragged from their homes by Draconian soldiers, children crying as their parents were loaded onto slave ships, entire settlements burned to ash because they had tried to resist. The Draconians were spreading across human space like a disease. "I can see what they did to your people," Lyra whispered with tears in her purple eyes. "So much suffering and pain." Rose's expression hardened as she understood what was happening. "You can see Draconian memories of their attacks on human worlds?" "Her powers are broken," Kyle explained. "She cannot control what she sees anymore. But yes, she is experiencing the memories of everyone around her, including enemies. Then you know why I hate them," Rose said grimly. "They hit the colony where my sister lived. By the time Earth Defense Forces arrived, there was nothing left but smoke and bodies." Rose stepped away from the medical table and stared out a small window at the stars beyond. "I have been hunting Draconian raiders for 2 years, but they always run back to their main fleet when I get close. One small merchant ship cannot fight an entire battle group." "My mother could help," Lyra said hopefully. "Queen Zara commands the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. If I could contact her, she would send ships to protect human space." "That is the problem, Princess," Rose replied. "According to my sources, the Draconian fleet has blockaded all approaches to Zephyrian space. Nothing gets through without being destroyed. Your mother probably thinks you are already dead." Kale studied star charts that Rose showed them on a computer screen. The Draconian blockade covered every normal route to the Zephyrian homeworlds. But there was one location marked in red that caught his attention. "What is this place?" he asked, pointing to a moon labeled as Kronos, ancient communication station, Rose answered. "Built by some race that died out long before humans reached the stars. The technology still works, but the place is heavily defended. Supposedly it can send messages across the entire galaxy instantly." "Then that is where we need to go," Kyle said with determination. Rose laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That is a suicide mission, Elf. The Draconians have a battle station orbiting Kronos with enough firepower to crack planets. Even if we could get past their fleet, the facility itself is a maze of death traps." Lyra tried to sit up, but weakness forced her back down. "My powers are getting worse. Soon I will not be able to think clearly at all. If we are going to contact my mother, it has to be soon." Kale looked at the alien princess who had become more important to him than his own life. Then he looked at Rose, who had lost her family to the same enemies. Finally, he looked at the star charts and made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "I will go to Kronos alone," he announced. My elven abilities might let me get through the facility defenses. You two can try to find a safe place to hide until I succeed." "Absolutely not," Lyra protested. "I will not let you sacrifice yourself for me again." "The elf is right," Rose said quietly. "One person might be able to sneak through where a ship would be detected immediately. But Kale, you need to understand that you probably will not come back from this." Kale nodded slowly. "I know. But if I can get a message to Queen Zara, then maybe she can stop the Draconians from hurting anyone else. Sometimes one life is worth risking to save many others." As Rose prepared her ship to head toward the Kronos system, Lyra grabbed Kale's hand with what little strength she had left. "Promise me something," she said. "Promise that you will try to survive. I do not want your sacrifice to be for nothing." "I promise I will do everything I can to come back to you," Kale replied, though he knew it was probably a lie. The Kronos system looked like a graveyard of broken dreams. Dead ships floated in the void around the ancient moon, while Draconian warships patrolled like vultures waiting for fresh prey. In the center of it all sat the massive battle station that Commander Vex had brought to guard the communication facility. Rose guided her ship through the asteroid field that surrounded Kronos, using every trick she had learned in years of avoiding detection. The Spirit of Aurora was built for smuggling and had stealth systems that could fool most scanners. But getting close to the moon without being seen would still require a miracle. "Draconian patrol coming around the far side," Rose whispered as she watched her screens. "They will see us in 30 seconds unless we find cover." Kale crouched near the escape pod that would carry him to the surface. He had studied the facility plans until he knew every corridor and chamber. The ancient builders had used technology that worked like elven magic in some ways. His natural abilities might let him interface with systems that would kill anyone else. "There," Rose said as she spotted a gap between two patrol routes. "I can get you within a few kilometers of the surface. After that, you are on your own." Lyra lay on a medical bed nearby, looking worse than ever. Her telepathic episodes were happening almost constantly now. Sometimes she would speak to people who were not there, or react to memories from decades ago. Kyle could see that she was losing herself piece by piece. "The facility has defenses that activate automatically," Rose warned as she prepared to launch the escape pod. "Ancient guardian systems that do not care if you are friend or enemy. And even if you reach the communication array, there is no guarantee it will work." "It will work," Kale said with confidence he did not feel. "It has to work." He looked last time at Lyra, who was staring at the ceiling with unfocused eyes. For just a moment, her gaze became clear and she looked directly at him. "I can see something," she whispered. "A memory that has not happened yet. You standing in a place of light and shadow, making a choice that will echo across the stars." "What choice?" Kyle asked. But Lyra had already drifted back into confusion. Rose fired the escape pod toward Kronos and immediately began moving away at maximum speed. She knew that staying close would only get them all killed. The small pod fell through space, like a metal teardrop carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain fate. Kale felt the pod shake as it entered the thin atmosphere around the ancient moon. Through the small window, he could see the communication facility rising from the surface like a crystal mountain. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Something about its design reminded him of the oldest elven architecture from before. His people had hidden in the forests. The pod crashed into rocky ground near the facility entrance. Kale climbed out and immediately felt something strange in the air. Power hummed through the ground beneath his feet like a sleeping giant's heartbeat. This place was more than just a communication station. It was a temple to technology beyond anything the current galaxy had achieved. Guardian robots emerged from hidden compartments as soon as Kyle approached the main entrance. They looked like metal spiders with weapons where their eyes should be. But when they scanned him, something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, they simply moved aside and allowed him to pass. Inside the facility, Kale found corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with symbols that shifted and changed as he looked at them. Some of the markings were similar to ancient elven writing, but others came from languages that had been dead for millions of years. As he moved deeper into the complex, Kale began to understand why the Guardians had let him pass. The builders of this place had known about elves long before his people had left their homeworld. They had designed the facility to recognize certain genetic patterns and magical abilities. Kale was not an intruder here. He was an expected guest, but the journey was not without danger. Ancient defense systems activated as he moved through the chambers. Laser grids tried to slice him apart, while pressure plates triggered crushing walls. Only his elven reflexes and ability to sense the flow of energy through the building kept him alive. In the deepest chamber, he found the communication array. It was a sphere of crystalline material that floated in the center of a vast room. Energy flowed around it in patterns that hurt to look at directly. This device could indeed send messages across the galaxy instantly, but using it would require more power than the facility normally generated. Kale placed his hands on the control interface and felt the ancient technology respond to his touch. Elven magic flowed into the machine like water filling a dry well. The crystal sphere began to glow brighter as it drew power from his life force itself. He activated the communication link and reached across space toward the Zephyrian Empire. For a moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, he was connected to a vast network of minds all focused on finding their lost princess. "This is Kale Moonwhisper calling Queen Zara Voidheart," he said into the swirling energy. "I have your daughter. She is alive but needs immediate rescue." The response came back instantly, filled with relief and desperate hope. "This is Queen Zara. Where is my child? How do I know you speak the truth?" Kale quickly explained everything that had happened, from the crash on his world to their escape through the ancient portal. He described Lyra's condition and the danger from the Draconian fleet. As he spoke, he could feel the communication array drawing more and more power from his body. "I believe you, Elf," Queen Zara said when he finished. "Your sacrifice to save my daughter proves that honor exists in all species. I am bringing my fleet to your location immediately." But as the connection ended, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The massive power drain had triggered automatic safety systems. Emergency lights flashed red as a mechanical voice announced that total facility destruction would begin in 10 minutes. Kale ran through collapsing corridors as the ancient building began to tear itself apart. He had known this might happen, but had hoped to find another way out. The communication array had used so much energy that the facility's power core was overloading. Near the entrance, he found what looked like an escape system built into the wall. Ancient symbols showed that it was designed for emergency evacuation. But the system was so old that activating it was like trying to wake something from a dream of ages. Kyle pressed his hands against the controls and poured the last of his magic into the machine. The escape pod activated just as explosions began tearing through the facility behind him. He was thrown into space as the communication station collapsed into a ball of fire that lit up the dark side of Kronos. Meanwhile, on the Spirit of Aurora, Lyra suddenly sat up with a scream that echoed through the ship. Her broken telepathic powers had locked onto Kale's mind at the moment of the explosion. She felt his pain and fear and determination all mixed together in a wave of emotion that nearly stopped her heart. "He is gone," she whispered, as tears ran down her blue cheeks. "Kyle sacrificed himself to save me." But even as she spoke, her words, a new presence touched her mind. Vast and powerful and filled with love that burned like a star. Queen Zara had arrived with the entire Zephyrian fleet. The most feared ruler in 3 galaxies was coming to collect her daughter and make the Draconians pay for everything they had done. Rose watched through her ship's cameras as hundreds of Zephyrian warships dropped out of hyperspace around Kronos. They moved like a silver storm across the void while the Draconian fleet tried desperately to escape. But there would be no escape this time. Queen Zara had come for vengeance. The flagship Eternal Harmony was larger than most space stations. Its hull gleamed like polished metal, while weapons powerful enough to crack moons tracked toward Draconian targets. When Queen Zara spoke, her voice carried across all communication channels. "I am Queen Zara Voidheart, and you have made a terrible mistake. You took my daughter and threatened an innocent world. Now you will learn why the galaxy fears my name." Queen Zara Voidheart stood 8 feet tall with silver hair that flowed like liquid starlight down her back. Her skin was the pale blue of deep ocean ice, and her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had ruled an empire for 300 years. When she moved across the bridge of her flagship, every officer stood straighter, as if in the presence of a living goddess. The Draconian fleet tried to fight, but their weapons barely scratched the Zephyrian shields. Advanced technology that had taken centuries to develop made the battle completely one-sided. Within an hour, every enemy ship was either destroyed or surrendering. Commander Vex Shadowbane himself was captured when his flagship lost power and drifted helplessly in space. But Queen Zara was not interested in the battle. Her entire focus was on the small merchant vessel that her sensors had detected hiding in the asteroid field, the ship that carried her daughter back from the edge of death. "Bring them aboard immediately," she commanded, "and scan the debris field around Kronos. If this elf survived the explosion, I want him found." Lyra was barely conscious when Zephyrian soldiers carried her onto the flagship. Her telepathic powers had burned themselves out during Kale's final moments. She kept whispering his name over and over as medical teams worked to stabilize her condition. Queen Zara knelt beside her daughter's bed with tears in her ancient eyes. "My precious child, I thought I had lost you forever." "Mother, he saved me," Lyra whispered. "A stranger from a world that fears us chose to risk everything for someone he barely knew. He proved that different species can work together if they try." The Queen listened as Lyra told the complete story of her rescue and escape. She learned about Kale's courage in defying his own people to help an alien princess. She heard about the friendship that had grown between an elf and a Zephyrian, despite centuries of mistrust between their worlds. "This Kale Moonwhisper sounds like a remarkable individual," Queen Zara said thoughtfully. "It saddens me that such nobility was rewarded with death." But at that moment, a communication officer approached with urgent news. "Your Majesty, our deep space scanners have detected a life pod in the debris field. The biosignature matches elven physiology." Queen Zara rose to her feet with hope blazing in her eyes. "Deploy rescue teams immediately. If this hero still lives, then we will save him just as he saved my daughter." The rescue took 6 hours as Zephyrian ships carefully searched through the wreckage of the ancient facility. Finally, they found a small escape pod that was barely intact. Inside lay Kale Moonwhisper, unconscious but breathing. His elven healing abilities had kept him alive through injuries that would have killed anyone else. When Kale woke up, he found himself in a medical bay that looked like something from a dream. Healing technology beyond anything his people had imagined was repairing damage to his body at the cellular level. Standing beside his bed was the most impressive being he had ever seen. "So you are the elf who saved my daughter," Queen Zara said in a voice like music made from wind and starlight. "I have ruled an empire for 3 centuries, but I have rarely met courage like yours." Kyle tried to sit up, but the Queen gently pressed him back down. "Your Majesty, I only did what anyone with honor would do. Lyra needed help, and I was there to give it." "No, young one, you did much more than that," Queen Zara replied. "You showed me something I had forgotten in my years of ruling through strength and fear. You proved that understanding between species is possible if someone is brave enough to reach across the darkness." She moved to a window that showed the vast Zephyrian fleet surrounding them. "For too long, I have believed that isolation and military power were the only ways to keep my people safe. But watching different species work together to save my daughter has opened my eyes to new possibilities." Kyle was confused by the Queen's words. "I do not understand, Your Majesty." Queen Zara smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise over an alien world. "I am offering your people something that has never been given to any species before: full membership in the Zephyrian Alliance with all the benefits and protections that brings." "But my people will never accept such an offer," Kale protested. "They fear anything that comes from the stars. That is why they exiled me for helping Lyra." "Perhaps they will change their minds when they see what you have accomplished," the Queen replied. "I am going to Eldheim personally to speak with your leaders, and I am bringing you as my official ambassador to prove that cooperation benefits everyone." 3 days later, the largest fleet in galactic history appeared in orbit around the elven home world. But instead of invasion ships, these vessels came in peace. Queen Zara herself rode in a small shuttle down to the forest where Elder Maya Silverleaf waited with the entire Elven Council. The meeting took place in a clearing where ancient trees formed a natural cathedral. Queen Zara stood before the Elven leaders with Kale at her side. She wore simple robes instead of royal armor and carried no weapons. This was diplomacy, not conquest. "Honored elders of Eldheim," Queen Zara began, "I come to you not as a conqueror, but as a mother whose child was saved by one of your people. Kale Moonwhisper risked everything to protect my daughter when he could have simply walked away." Elder Maya looked at Kale with surprise and something that might have been pride. "We thought you were lost to us, young ranger." The council declared, "You dead for breaking our laws about contact with outsiders." "He broke your laws to save an innocent life," Queen Zara said firmly. "And in doing so, he has shown me that your people possess wisdom my empire desperately needs. We have advanced technology, but you have something more valuable. You understand harmony with the natural world." Lyra stepped forward from behind her. "Mother." She was fully healed now, and her telepathic powers were working correctly again. "The Elven way of living could teach us so much about balance and sustainability. And our technology could help protect worlds like yours from threats you cannot imagine." For hours, the Queen spoke about the benefits of joining the Alliance: protection from hostile species like the Draconians, access to medical technology that could cure any disease, trade opportunities that would bring prosperity without destroying the forest environment. But her most convincing argument was simply pointing to Kale himself. "This young elf accomplished something my entire fleet could not do. He saved my daughter through courage and compassion alone. If one of your people can achieve such greatness, imagine what all of you could do working together with other species." T. Maya conferred with the other council members and whispered Elven that even Kale could barely understand. Finally, she spoke for all of them. "The council has decided to accept your offer, Queen Zara, but only if Kyle Moonwhisper agrees to serve as our permanent representative to your alliance. He has proven that contact with outsiders does not have to mean the destruction of our way of life." Kyle was speechless. He had expected exile or death for his actions. Instead, he was being offered a chance to bridge two completely different civilizations. "I accept," he said simply. Queen Zara's reply was indeed unbelievable. Instead of punishing those who had helped her, she chose to reward an entire species for the actions of one individual. The draconian threat was ended when their own people rebelled after learning that cooperation was more powerful than conquest. 1 year later, Kale stood in a gleaming diplomatic center built where the forest met the stars. Representatives from dozens of species came to Eldheim to learn from the elven example of living in harmony with nature. Lyra worked beside him as the first cultural exchange ambassador, helping other worlds understand that differences between species were strengths, not weaknesses. The most amazing thing was how quickly fear turned to friendship when people actually met each other instead of just believing old stories. Human merchants brought goods that elves had never imagined, while elven healers shared knowledge that saved lives across the galaxy. Queen Zara visited often and always made time to walk through the forest with Kale and Lyra. She said that these quiet moments among the ancient trees helped her remember why she had become a ruler in the first place. Not to dominate others, but to protect the innocent and build a better future for all species. The Draconian Consortium collapsed completely when their own people learned about the peace and prosperity that cooperation could bring. Commander Vex Shadowbane spent the rest of his life in prison, while his former soldiers chose to join the Alliance and help rebuild the worlds they had once attacked. As Kyle watched ships from 100 different worlds landing peacefully in his forest home, he thought about how much had changed since that night when he first saw fire falling from the sky. One choice to help a stranger had transformed an entire galaxy from a place of fear and isolation into something amazing. Lyra often joined him on these quiet evenings when he reflected on how their story had begun. "Do you ever regret what you did?" she asked one night as they watched stars appear between the leaves. "Never," Kale replied without hesitation. "Sometimes the greatest risks lead to the most wonderful rewards." And in the distance, Queen Zara smiled as she sensed the contentment of two beings who had proven that courage and compassion could indeed change the universe.